the 16 aspects of the Four Truths, impermanence and so forth, are the objects of observation of the paths. This, I think, is quite important. Reflecting on the Four Noble Truths. Reflecting on the Four Noble Truths, and also reflecting on the four seals of the Buddha's teaching. Four seals of the Buddha's teaching. So, reflecting on the Four Noble Truths, the first of which is the truth of suffering. So there, what is said there in the truth of suffering, and what is said there in the four seals of Buddha's teaching, they are much more the same, right? With a slight difference, the last one. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are of suffering nature, and everything is of the nature of emptiness and selflessness, and transcending sorrow is ultimate virtue and peace. So here, whereas in terms of these are the four seals of the Buddha's teaching, and then the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, the four characteristics. By the way, did you get that copy of the all 16 characteristics of the one?
I think it is.
It is there. Okay. Yeah. So that you must, try to make some sense, and then if you think that you need me to do that, or just touch them or explain it, then I'll do, when the rest of the members come, when we all come back, unite again after a few days. Yeah, so that's quite important. And above all, reflecting on the Four Noble Truths themselves, each of the Four Noble Truths, right? Each of the four. And then particularly, the emphasis should be on the first. First meaning the four characteristics of the first truth. So that's really very important. And then another important thing is to reflect on the truth of the cessation of suffering, the third truth, right? Out of the Four Noble Truths, the third one, the truth of the cessation of suffering. So that's really very important. We need is just take it for granted that this is something there. Rather, we need to know, first of all, try to convince ourselves as to how that is possible, the truth of the cessation is possible, one. And then, on the basis of one's understanding of how we are in the midst of suffering, in the midst of the fire of suffering, then, and at the same time, if you come to know how the truth of cessation is possible, liberation is possible, then we will have a great desire to, emerge out of this suffering, because we know where to go, and we know we are where we are, the suffering state, and we also know where, a liberated state, where to go. But don't think of liberated state in the form of some paradise somewhere over there. It is within ourselves. It is the very nature of our mind. We need to create that. But if you can know well ahead of time as to what it could be like, whether it is possible to achieve that, then there will be a genuine push from within, rather than having the need of someone else pushing you. Right? This is actually, quite interesting, because these things are really very important. First of all, the push, towards the practice of Dharma, gaining a deep sense of desire for that, through seeing the suffering nature of oneself, and then knowing about the possibility of achieving nirvana. If if your mind is more tuned towards that, then eagerness to practice Dharma, this joy in practicing Dharma will be so spontaneous. So whereas right now, we have been hearing from others that, oh, we must practice Dharma, otherwise we don't know the plight of us in the next life and so forth. So because of these, then we are somewhat pushed, we feel a kind of obligation rather than a joy. So because of these realizations, the realization that you are in really like the fire of suffering, in the midst of the fire of suffering, and then you see that the possibility of achieving Buddhahood or nirvana within oneself, where you are totally freed of any stain of suffering. So when that becomes so alive in one's mind, then the practice of Dharma will become so joyous, rather than feeling obligation to do it, right? Say for example, if you are so tired, or if you're so thirsty, then wanting to drink water is something so spontaneous. Once you have it, no need for someone else to tell you, drink it, with great joy you will drink it. And you will feel so grateful for someone who would, give you that. So similarly, when you truly feel that we are so thirsty, we are in great pain, then there would be and seeing the possibility of the freedom from this pain, and then in terms of actually drinking the water or practicing Dharma would be a great joy rather than taking some form of burden, right? So that I think is really very important, for which the practice of the reflecting on the Four Noble Truths would have a tremendous effect on one. Okay, and then also we try to relate that in terms of personal experience of our lives. So we constantly hear about people, over there, or getting sick, or over there getting old, over there dying, in 2 days, 3 days. So it's not, always outside. One day it will happen on us as well. We don't know. And this is bound to happen. It's not that, there's a chance. It's not like that. It's just bound to happen, which means that, we should be well prepared, well ahead of time, right? So by reflecting on all these things, by being more far-sighted, thinking long terms, by including the long terms into our, our thought and reflection, meditation, then the practice will become really very, joyful, spontaneous, and perpetuating, rather than gaps. Oh, today let me take a break. Not like that. It will be so joyous, and spontaneous. Okay, so that's really very important. Reflecting on the 16 aspects of the Four Truths. Why I'm saying this is that, in fact, I'm reading one of Lama Tsongkhapa's composition. So in it, he mentioned that, I see lots of practitioners spending so much of time earnestly practicing the Dharma, but because of their inability to understand, how to practice, what exactly to practice, because of which I see them wasting so much of time. This is what he said. So, then that really, again, helped me so much to really pay how important it is for one to understand the actual Dharma, not simply feeling that you are practicing Dharma, not simply feeling that, you are connected to Dharma. This alone is not sufficient. So what is required is, of course, this is really very important part of the practice, but at the same time, you must be able to see what the real Dharma is. Right? So that's really very important. And the real Dharma should be understood in the context of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, you know, which should be the basis, the foundation, on the basis of which the real sense of renunciation, the bodhicitta, you know, they should arise. And on the basis of which, then the sheer desire to practice the three higher trainings, at the observing sound ethical discipline, the higher training of ethical discipline, meditative concentration, and the higher training of wisdom, you know, and then add to it the practice of practice of bodhicitta, accompanied by the practice of the six perfections. You know, so all these things, they should come about from this basic foundation of the understanding and reflection on the Four Noble Truths and their 16 characteristics. So that's really very important, right? Okay. So what you know, I would like to simply tell you or share you with is that, in fact, you are really very fortunate to have your kind of permanent resident teacher, Venerable Chudrala. At the same time, she has also been so kind, you know, for you by inviting all different teachers here, you know, so you're getting access to many teachers. So sometimes, you know, teachers come and then they teach some very complicated things, right? So there, make it a point to attend those teachings, you know, even if it's really complicated, because, you know, Buddhism is not something easy. It's really very complicated and very profound, right? So unless and until there is a very, you know, sophisticated training, exercise of your mind, you know, our mind really cannot go along the path of Buddhism, right? So there must be a very sophisticated mental exercise. So for that, the sophisticated teachings are really necessary, crucial, right? Okay, but it doesn't mean that without these you cannot practice anything. Of course you can practice, but what degree of practice you like to have? What degree of the quality of practice you like to have? 20%, 40%, 80%, 90%? You know, if you like to have a greater degree of the quality of your practice, then I would suggest you go for all these sophisticated teachings, right? While not forgetting what you do regularly. You carry on with what you're doing, the practicing these things, plus make sure to, you know, to boost your practice. The sophisticated teachings are crucially required, right? Okay, so this is what I like to share with you. And then, of course, nowadays there are various English translations of the sophisticated Buddhist philosophical teachings in English translation. So you try to read over them, and if you ever come across difficulties, and then make sure that you know, ask teachers to solve these problems, or you discuss among yourselves. But, you know, when discussing among yourselves, don't simply take it for granted that, oh, this is what we have, you know, we have decided and this should be the answer. No, don't simply feel complacent over the answers that come to you through your discussion. You know, still leave it open for further discussions and for further learning. Okay? Right. Next. The 16 aspects of the Four Truths, impermanence and so forth, are the objects of observation of the paths. So every time we see this, the proponents of sutra assert that the subtle selflessness and the subtle selflessness of persons are mutually inclusive. So because they don't accept the selflessness of phenomena, right? They simply accept the selflessness of persons, which means that whenever there's discussion of selflessness, it simply will refer to the selflessness of persons, right? So if it is the gross selflessness, it means the gross selflessness of persons, and subtle selflessness referring to subtle selflessness of persons. Next, a person's emptiness of being a self that is permanent, unitary, and independent independent is asserted to be the coarse selflessness of persons. So this we did yesterday. A person's emptiness of being substantially existent in the sense of being self-sufficient. So this, to put it in more, easy language, would be a person's emptiness of self-sufficient substantial existence, as simple as that, is asserted to be the subtle selflessness of persons. We did that as well yesterday. Now, objects abandoned by the parts. This also we partly, did. Like the proponents of the great exposition, the proponents of sutra use the vocabulary of the conception of a self of persons, afflictive ignorance. So they use the conception of self of persons, meaning the grasping at the grasping at the self of persons. Self of persons here referring to self here, don't simply think of that. Whenever there is to use the word self, you simply don't make it rigid, don't make it narrow. Simply don't try to immediately either rush it to the self or the person in the conventional person, or simply don't rush it to the object of negation. Be flexible. Whenever there's word self, be flexible. See, this word is used here again, the self. Under which situation or in which context it is used? Just check that. You should know the context in which this word self is used. Say, for example, if I say, there is no self, it doesn't mean that the self doesn't exist. What I'm referring to here, in this case, when I say there is no self, self should be negated, and the self is what, the belief in self is what creates all the problems. So when I talk of the self in a negative sense, so here you should immediately understand the context. The self here refers to self-sufficient substantial self. Right? Okay. And then according to the higher schools, again it can refer to even subtler levels of object of negation. Right? So this we need to really be able to contextualize. Okay. So here it says the conception of the self of persons. So this is used in a little bit negative sense. So what would be the reference? What would be the referent of this word self? Anyone?
Either the subtle or coarse selflessness that they just previously defined.
Yes, exactly. So it is actually the self which is to be negated. This can be of two kinds: the gross self to be negated, and the subtle self to be negated. What is the gross self to be negated? Atma, yeah, exactly. Unitary, what is permanent, eternal, independent self. Or what is the subtle self which is negated? Self-sufficient, substantial self. That's it, right? Okay. Then afflictive ignorance. According to Vibhashka, they spoke about afflictive ignorance and non-afflictive ignorance. Afflictive ignorance, so this we have already studied in Vibhashka, right? Afflictive ignorance is the one which obscures us from achieving nirvana. And the non-afflictive ignorance is what obscures us from achieving or achieving Buddhahood. And they don't use the word obscurations. Instead of that, simply said ignorance, afflictive ignorance, non-afflictive ignorance. So these are just small things, right? This is not a major thing. Anyway, for knowing that, there's no harm. Okay, then a non-afflictive ignorance, aside from merely those, the proponents of sutra and the proponents of the great exposition do not assert a conception of self of phenomena. This is one thing that they share, They don't have any understanding of the selflessness of phenomena, so they don't posit the self of phenomena and selflessness of phenomena. Nor do they assert obstructions to omniscience. Omniscience, according to them, is unacceptable. Omniscience means, as we would understand, a mental state, a single pure mental state of a Buddha, which understands every phenomena within a single instant of time, simultaneously. And this, according to Vipassana and Sautrantika, is not possible, right? So then what is Buddha? What is Buddha's mind? So they would say, Buddha's mind, even Buddha's mind cannot understand everything simultaneously. But one thing so unique of the Buddha's mind is that, simply, you want to know quantum physics, right? Simply direct your mind towards quantum physics and you understand it. And you want to understand biology, you direct your mind towards biology, again you understand it, So it's a matter of you directing your mind, right? So actually their perception, their explanation of how the mind works is very much in accordance with the ordinary people's, ways of thinking. Because say, in our sense, say, you know how to cook, and you know how to read Shakespeare, right? And also you also know how to hike. But when you are really involved in reading Shakespeare, right? Although you know how to hike, but your mind as to how to hike is totally, docile for the time being. And likewise, how to cook, or cooking a delicious meal. So that also is just dormant for a while when the mind is there. So although you know all these things, but then, don't you know how to cook? You're not at all thinking about it. Oh, because my mind is just, the way my mind works is that it takes one object at a time. It's like my hand. I pick up this. My hand has the capacity to pick up this mug, this flower, this book, these sheets, and this thing and the cloth and these things. But when I take this mug, simultaneously I cannot take the flower, right? So my hand can, have object just one at a time. So similarly, this is what they think. Similarly, in our case, our mind works in that fashion. It will simply have one object at a time. Although we know lots of things, but when actually you try to think of the object, you simply can think of one object at a time. Similarly, but say we know how to cook, we know how to drive, we know how to read, stories, we know how to climb. But when you do something, you cannot do the other things, right? But it's not the case that you can do everything if you are given a chance. Say, if you have to think about as to how, the electrons are moving right now, we cannot really get access to it. We cannot really understand it, right? So this means that although there are many things we know, and yet there are still many things which are beyond our understanding. Whereas for Buddha, there is nothing which is beyond his understanding. But although he knows everything, but he knows them one by one at a time. This is the belief of Vipassakas and Sautrantikas. So unlike this, the Chittamatras and the Madhyamikas, higher schools, from their point of view, is very different. So look, when we are simply, when we are thinking of these tenet systems, right, studying the tenets, then your mind cannot really get to how to cook well, how to do the fine things. That is not coming to your mind. So it is not because you don't know how to cook well, but because there's a limitation. What is that limitation? There's an obscuration to really be able to reach to, these two things simultaneously. There's obscuration. What is that obscuration? That obscuration is the obscuration to omniscience. So once you eliminate the obscurations, then why not? You get access to everything. It's not just that you get things one at a time. That you get everything simultaneously. So this is from the point of view of Chittamatra and Madhyamika school. Okay. Yes.
So does that mean the Vaishikas and Sautrantikas think that Buddha still has some obscuration?
Okay, so this is the explanation that I gave is according to Chittamatra and Madhyamika.
Right.
And they don't believe, they say that, oh, it's not that the Buddha has some obscuration, but it's because this is how the mind works.
Even Buddha's mind.
Yeah,
Oh,
you know.
okay.
And that it would be impossible for anybody.
Yeah, this is just impossible for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is how the mind works.
How can we refute that? 'Cause
I see.
We see we can do just one thing at a time. So how you know that's possible?
Very good question. Can you help, any one of you help me?
I think it probably has something to do with how the Yamakas and Chittamaugas don't accept, or rather, that they would accept that because conventional phenomena are not inherently existent, and in emptiness they have all one taste.
Yeah.
Somehow, perhaps this has to do with the mind being able to simultaneously, from a place of emptiness,
Intelligent,
but wrong, I'm guessing.
intelligent, but still not fully answered. Still, you know, getting somewhere. Anyone? Very wise question. Make sure that you keep this question, note it down. Right? That's really very important.
Will you get answer or
Sorry?
will you get answer as the course goes on?
Actually, I would say why I, I'll try to explain to you, right now. But still, even if I answered it and you're so happy about it, still I want you to keep your question noted down. All of you. This is really very important, because our job, finally, we are supposed to be the follower of Madhyamikas, right? Particularly Kathleen, Prasangika Madhyamika. So we should all follow her. So in that case, our job is not simply, to become Arhat yourself. We want to become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, to benefit all sentient beings. So then, according to the higher schools, to benefit all sentient beings simultaneously, for that you need to achieve the state of omniscience. And this state of omniscience is what the lower schools they don't accept, the two lower schools, right? So this is something so unique. And once you have it, it's a wonderful, wonderful faculty in you to benefit other sentient beings, all other sentient beings, So, as I said earlier, whatever you like to achieve in the future, that you must make it a point that you understand it as to how to get there, rather than simply keep it in belief level. Oh, please, or may I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, that you don't know how to become a Buddha. That's really very sad. This is what is meant by Lama Tsongkhapa, when he said that it's so sad to see many people wasting lots and lots of their time, outward superficially appearing to be a very genuine practitioner, with great piety, but in real sense, just wasting time. That's really very sad. This is what he said. So what I mean to say here is, as Lama Tsongkhapa rightly pointed out, we need to know exactly what we are supposed to achieve and how to achieve that. Don't simply take things for granted. And this question is a very serious question in that regard. Because our goal, this right at the beginning of this session, we said, Sanje Chodaso Cholamla, so which means that, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I achieve enlightenment. And through the virtues of the accumulation such as generosity, may I become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. May I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. We already said this. It's such a wonderful prayer, but how are you going to become Buddha? What does it mean by Buddha? It means an omniscient being. And how to become omniscient? This is the whole issue. Very important question. We all must, should be feeling thankful to Christina for this question. That's really very important. And this is really an issue, so we are not supposed to take things for granted. Fortunately, we are embracing Buddhism. In Buddhism, we don't encourage any blind faith, So there is always encouragement to use your wisdom to the maximum. So that's really very important, and also the beauty of Buddhism. Now what is that? Right? Okay, so that I think, there are various levels of answering. Various levels of answering. Say, first let me put it this way. So this could be much more a blend, answer, a blend from the sutric system and the tantric system, right? Again, I warn you, when you keep on asking these questions, when you ask these questions, somebody may answer it. After answering it, please don't simply keep it, don't say it, oh yes, still that's not final. Keep on asking. Come up with the next question, next one, still next question, unless and until it becomes so clear to you as though like everything is there in your eyes, right? Don't simply feel complacent with someone giving you one answer. Come up with the next question, Now look, to come up with the next question, you should have the sharpness. You should have the sharpness of your mind to be able to, tease apart very subtle aspects and nuances here. So for that, we need to study tenets. So with these tenet systems, when you learn this, then you will develop this faculty to ask the questions, with which can really tease apart the subtle nuances you find there. So that's really very important. Okay, so the answer that I'm going to give you right now is going to be much more of the blend of the sutric and the tantric explanation. And then the next thing, what I'm going to do is going to do more from the sutra. The first one, is that just as, say, this water that we have here, anyway, this could be a better example. The picture here, what about the water inside? Is it clear or really muddy?
Clear.
Very clear, right? Okay. So imagine instead of that, so say you put a mud in it and then stir it. Will it become clearer? No, it'll become murky, Okay. Now the question is there any possibility by which we can bring back, the original clarity of this water? How do we do that?
Let the dust settle, or remove it by a filter. By filter or by putting some chemicals. Alum, put it, and then it'll immediately, draw forth all the dusts and the muds, and settle down. And then top will be again the clear water back, right? Okay. Similarly, so this means that, we are able to separate. Although the second moment we see the water muddy, right? Which means that the original clarity is lost. And wherever you try to get it, expecting that, the clarity, the clear part of the water must be on the other side. Again, the other side also is muddy. Inside is also muddy. Wherever you look at, you don't see the clarity of the water. It seems like as though the clarity of the water is lost forever. But it's not the case. We can separate. The clarity of the water still resides there within the water, that muddy water. The only thing is that it has now become dormant or docile, right? Now our job is to let it manifest again. How to do that? You don't have to do anything new, because the true nature of that water is the clarity. So we don't need to do anything else. What we simply do is that simply get rid of that muddy part. And then the clarity of the water will automatically become manifest. So simply use some chemical alum to settle, let the dirts settle right? Then once all these dirts settle, what will happen? The clarity will come back. It's not that we have to, after settling the dirts, then you introduce the, you bring another clear part to make it clear. No need to do that. Because the true nature of the water is the clear part, the clarity, right? Okay, so likewise, true nature of our mind, the true nature of our mind is, is expansive. Expansive meaning it can pervade everywhere simultaneously. This is the true nature of our mind. Because say, I don't know the English word. Say for example, I don't know the English word for this flower, right? And then, what is this flower? Oh, this is a flower. Then, what about that daisy? Daisy flower? There are other, daisy flowers and what? What are the flowers we have? Buttercups and lily and orchid, all these things. And yet I don't know, the typical name of this flower, right? And then you teach me, oh, this is called rose, right? And then, because of which, it is like when you teach me this is rose, you are actually not instilling anything new in me. You simply take out the dirt of, the misknowledge of the name. You have simply taken out this dirt. And because of which, my mind comes back to its real nature, one of the real natures, which is understand the English word for this, the English name for this. So you simply take out the dirts, and then the knowledge is automatic there. Right? Right? So this indicates that something is obscuring our mind. Something is obscuring our mind, and if you eliminate that of the obscuring elements, then the mind starts manifesting its true nature. Right? So our job is to eliminate these ignorances, the darkness, the obscurations. Once you eliminate them, then the true nature of the mind, just as why not that when I see the flower, I can also see the mark here. I'm seeing these two simultaneously. I can see all of you simultaneously here, right? So, whereas if there is a veil here, then I can see only three of you, which means I'm being blocked from seeing these two, So simply take out this veil, and again I'll see all of you again. So I didn't do anything new to see all of you. I simply took off this veil, right? So this means that the true nature of our mind has the capacity to see you all simultaneously. But what obstructed me from seeing, two of them? Because of this veil. Once you take the veil, that's it. So similarly, we take the veil, the veil of the ignorance which obscures knowing things. Right? And then, but then how many ignorances are there? Is it one? Two? The ignorance, misconceiving, or not knowing, the lack, which lacks the knowledge of the name of this flower, which lacks the knowledge of the name of, Alec, which lacks the knowledge of the name of, what it means by this piece of paper. Is it just one, two, three? Oh, countless. So, if you go about eliminating each of these ignorances, it's impossible that we can do it, Even in hundreds of thousands of eons of lifetimes, impossible still, right? So, I think this is quite important remark from Atisha the Great. Atisha, I think he is 11th century, 11th century Indian master who visited Tibet and who said that, the amount of the objects the amount of the objects or the phenomena to know is infinitely great, and your lifespan is too short. Just as the swans or the ducks drink only the milk and leave behind the water, so too should you take the deep essence and, leave the rest. So what he's indicating, and what the Buddha, advised us to do, or what the Buddha has pointed to, the secret of this is to discover the root of all these problems, the root of all these ignorances, rather than handling each of the ignorances. Say, if there is a wave of army coming to invade you, it would be just foolish on your part to try to challenge each of these, soldiers. So the better would be try to know who is the mastermind behind this. Get a hold of the mastermind and talk to him. And then if he's happy, then he'll say stop, and then everything will be stopped. So similarly, what do we do? The Buddha has shown us this, he has actually disclosed this secret. Simply try to look for this mastermind of all these ignorances. Once you get it, then all the ignorances, however numerous they are, they will simply stop on their own without your, having to spend so much or wasting so much of time dealing with each of them. And what is that? Anyone?
Ignorance which grasps inherent existence.
Wonderful, according to Prasangika, and then according to what? Sautrantika? Exactly. What? Christina, yeah? What? Yeah. Yeah, the ignorance which misconceives or which grasps at things to exist as substantial, what? Self-sufficient, substantial nature. Right? Okay, so, so then according to high schools, it is ignorance grasping at inherent existence. Right? So you simply deal with that, eliminate that, and then all ignorances will be, the veil, the veils of all ignorances will be lifted. Right? That is lifted. So then, what is the true nature of the mind? The true nature of the mind, just as I can see two things simultaneously, when there is no veil. So now when all veils are lifted, then why not you see everything simultaneously? Right? Oh, this is rather from the sutra system. I don't know whether to speak from tantric system. Okay, so from the tantric point of view, it is still more convincing. The true nature of the mind is actually a true nature of the mind, or let's better put it this way: the final, the ultimate mind from which all other minds, emerge. This ultimate mind is known as the innate clear-light mind. The ultimate mind, which is the basis for giving rise to all other, grosser levels of mind, it is known as what? Innate clear-light mind. Okay. Now, very unique presentation of Tantra says that all minds should necessarily be accompanied by by energy. Energy, which is physical form, physical, physical, not in the sense of something so gross and tangible as we can, see. It's not like that. It's very subtle. So, which means that in short, every mind, should necessarily be together with energy, right? Energy in the sense, physical energy, right? Say, anyone here, anyone who is a member of Sravasti Abbey should necessarily be together with the body. Is it true or not? True, right? The body is not the self, the person, but it must be together with the body. Similarly, this, all the mental states, they must be together with the physical energy. Now look, since that you have already learned about the single and the difference, the topic, objectively, one, what is that? To see whether something is objectively one or objectively distinct, what is the special term for that? Entity-wise, if you try to locate to the object, and if you don't have two distinct objects to locate to, if it is just one, then we say entity-wise one, right? So now look, so since that you already know about this concept, right? This energy and the minds and their respective energies, they are entity-wise one. So you cannot point to that. Oh, where's the color of this flower? Oh, it's here. Oh, where's the flower? It's here. Where's the impermanence of flower? It's here. We every time when we describe the flower, we simply point to the same object, right? This means that entity-wise, they are all just one. It's just the same object. But because of their different understanding, how they appear to your mind, then we describe them differently. So mentally or so what is that?
Nominally different.
Yeah, nominally they're distinct, right? So likewise, this subtle energy and the subtle mind, or first, let me put it this way: all minds and their respective energies, they are entity-wise what? One, just one. Just one. Like, we cannot really separate these two. Oh, this is the mind, this is the energy. We cannot separate that. It's just one entity. And then whereas, because, this same thing from the viewpoint of understanding objects, viewpoint of having the characteristics of experience, it is called as the mind. The same object, whether you point to it as the energy or whether you point to it as the mind, it has two basic characteristics, right? So for example, this flower has various characteristics. What we can see, this is one characteristic. You can also, touch it. The tactility, this is also one characteristic, right? And we can smell it, another characteristics. You taste it, another characteristic. The same object has various characteristics. So likewise, that same object, which we call as mind or which we call as energy, when you really go to point to, it's just the same object. It's just one. So we say the minds and their respective energy, they are entity-wise one, right? But in terms of, understanding this mind or the energy, so it has, that object has two primary characteristics. So one is that this can move from one place to another. This can move from one place to another, right? For example, say at the time of death, say you have to take birth in Tibet, right? It's not that you buy a flight ticket and go, fly to Tibet. You don't do that. It could be in a very short period of time, say a few seconds. You get there. This means there must be something which travels there. Our body is left behind, right? So what is that thing which travels there? It's the mind, right? So how can the mind travel there? So it must have a physical form, physicality. So this mind from the viewpoint of the characteristic of the locomotion, movement from one place to another, it is known as the energy. And the same object has the capacity to experience something. And this flower, unfortunately, it has no capacity to experience. Oh, you are so beautiful, and it doesn't have any feeling, oh, I'm being praised, I'm so happy. No. So it has no capacity to experience. And yet this energy has the capacity to experience something. So from that point of view, it is called as mind. You know? So the same object, because of having two different characteristics, what are they? One, the movement. It can move from one place to the other, because of which this object is called as energy. And yet at the same time, not only that it can move, even the cars can move. Alex is here and Alex's car is waiting outside there, you know. He's not feeling sad, oh no, he's not coming at all. He's not feeling like that, you know. Even if you leave for years, ages, it will remain like that, you know, no feeling at all. Right? It's just a form, 100% form. Whereas the energy that we're talking about, you know, so it has the ability to experience, ability to feel something, experience something, feel something. So from that point of view, it is referred to as mind. Say for example, you know, someone who teaches English in a primary school, and in Sravasti Abbey teaches how to do yoga. In Sravasti Abbey, everybody will call him yoga teacher, whereas in the primary school down there in Spokane town, he will call us English teacher, right? Or yeah, interestingly, Tibetan teacher, someone teaching Tibetan, right? So is this the same person or two different persons? Tibetan teacher and the yoga teacher. So if you say yoga teacher, English Tibetan teacher, you will say no, he's a yoga teacher, he's not Tibetan teacher. Whereas in primary school down there in Spokane town, people will say, our Tibetan teacher and not yoga teacher, right? But it's just the same person. Then why, if it is just the same person, why is it wrong to call him as Tibetan teacher when he's here? And why it is wrong to call him as yoga teacher when he's there in primary school, there in Spokane city? Because the same person has two characteristics or functions in two ways, right? So from the viewpoint of his function of teaching Tibetan, he is called as the Tibetan teacher. And from the viewpoint of his functioning to teach yoga, he is known as yoga teacher. You know, but in terms of the actual object, it's just one. It's the same person, right? And don't think that he's emanating oneself. The same person emanating in two ways. It's not like that. It's the same person, you know, but called in two different names. So likewise, the same object, because of its ability to move from one place to another place, it is known as energy. And from the point of view of its having the capacity to experience something, it is known as mind. Okay, now look, what is the basis of all the other grosser states of the mind? Innate, clear-light mind, right? Okay, so that subtlest, the most basic form of the mind is known as the innate clear-light mind, right? Innate clear-light mind. And along with that in a sense, the same object but having another characteristic as well. And what is that? The mobility, right? So there's the accompanying energy with that subtle mind, and this is referred to as the subtle energy, right? Subtle energy and the subtlest energy and the subtlest mind, these two are the same entity but nominally distinct, right? This we have to keep in mind. Okay, now look, the true nature of this subtle energy, the true nature, if you let it function in its own way so freely, if you let it function freely, 100% freely, then it has the capacity to pervade the entire universe, This is the capacity of this subtle energy. So wherever this energy pervades, what happens? The subtle mind as well pervades, right? So this is very unique presentation of highest yoga tantric and highest yoga tantra, right? So wherever when you're able to, when you're able to let this subtle energy of the mind, subtlest of the energy, free. So look, when you're able to let it function so freely without any obscurations, it simply pervades the entire universe. Entire universe. It's not that, it's not that. Now you may wonder, again, this is also, although it sounds so marvelous, but still, again, how do you prove that? This is another very, actually, I should be waiting for you to ask this question to me. So anyway, according to, again, Highest Yoga Tantra, if you think carefully, of course, this is quite a profound thing, which is not something which we can comprehend so easily. Still, let's see. In fact, the entire world, entire universe is nothing but the reflection of this subtle clear light mind. Right? So, when it starts flowing so freely, actually everything simply, arises from this subtle energy. So because of which, at one point, you see that, this, in a subtle sense, in a very subtle sense, everything is but the manifestation of this subtle energy and the subtle mind, right? So through a very subtle technique, if you can eliminate the obscurations which makes the obscurations which make this mind so rigid and not letting it flow so naturally and so freely, when you eliminate that that obscuration, then this energy will flow so naturally, So since that everything is simply a manifestation of that subtle energy, so it's nothing but it simply means that this energy pervades through everything. So when the energy pervades everywhere, accompanying the energy is this subtle clear light mind. So this subtle energy is the body of the Buddha, and this subtle mind is the omniscient mind of the Buddha. So wherever the body of the Buddha pervades, the Buddha's mind pervades, and wherever the Buddha's mind pervades, Buddha's body pervades. So for Buddha, nothing is obscured. Right? So now our job is to train this. Right now we do have this, energy. We do have this subtle mind and the subtle energy, but we don't know how to activate them. We need to do something to activate them. So, we need to follow through a very systematic, very precise, very skilled ways in order to activate this subtle energy and subtle mind. For which, let's say, the laser is like a laser beam. Yeah. By use of laser, we can do surgery, But the person who is really using this laser should be someone who is so skilled and precise in these things. Otherwise, you are supposed to, take out that, to, shatter that kidney stone, and then it might, instead of that, your hand is, trembling, and then laser might, destroy our heart. Very dangerous. So, the person who is really handling that must be also very skilled, precision, everything should be there, right? So, and then how can we really get there? oh, I'm going to become, you know, a medical doctor who can handle this, you know, and then you enroll yourself today, and then tomorrow you come up with all these, you know, the operation, the theater, the uniform. Can you do that? No, it needs lots of training, lots of training. Likewise, in order to use this laser-like, you know, very refined subtle energy and subtle mind, one must be trained so much. And the training must begin from where you are. You know, we should be really very realistic. From where we are, we should train. And what we are. So we lack self-discipline. You know, we want to spend more time, you know, sleeping or chat or, you know, sunbath, you know, and these things. So no self-discipline. You know, no joy in the virtuous practice. In terms of virtuous practice, we need to really put effort. In terms of the negativities, it's so spontaneous. This is our nature. What does it mean by that subtle energy? The refined state means a very refined state of all the virtuous, you know, all the virtuous qualities, which are all distilled, so distilled, you know, so clear. All subtle forms of negativities, they're all distilled and removed. Right? So that is so refined. For that, the practice, you know, should be from where we are. Begin from where we are. From this very lazy, you know, and spontaneously flowing into the negativities and feeling so difficult in terms of practicing the virtue, as though like just rolling a boulder along the hill, you know. And in terms of negativities, the boulder is just rolling down without any effort. So this is our nature. So we need to make it such that when it comes to virtue, it's like a boulder rolling down, so spontaneous. And when it comes to negativities, you know, it should be, you know, we should come to a point where it becomes so difficult for you to embrace the negativities as though like rolling a boulder uphill, you know. So when that happens, then there's a hope. But which of the two states, you know, we are in right now? So be very realistic, and from there, from where you are, you have to start, right? So the most important thing is the ethical discipline, you know, which for one to really become, you know, a medical doctor, you know, to handle this very sophisticated instrument, don't expect yourself doing that, you know, when you find yourself spending all your time in pubs and these things, you know, nightclubs, pubs. Then because of, you know, finding yourself all time in pubs, then you gradually you'll develop this, you know, hand like this. With this hand, it's impossible to handle this machine, right? So we have to sacrifice what we so call as, you know, happiness in samsara in order to really even become a medical doctor. You know, we have to sacrifice many things. So similarly, we have to sacrifice those things which ordinary people, which we the childish people consider as joy and happiness. We have to sacrifice some of them and then gradually start from there. Right? So what is that? So first, self-discipline. This is the secret. Right? So for that, the Buddha first came up with the teaching of the teachings of the three high trainings. The basic, the first of which is the high training in ethical discipline, right? So that's really very important. That's really very important. So without ethical discipline, without disciplining yourself, it is impossible to accomplish something great. So with that discipline, and this discipline is of varying levels again, you know, first disciplining the grosser levels of your behaviors, grosser levels of your mind, so which is truly reflected in your bodily and verbal actions. So disciplining not just physical body, actually it is disciplining your mind. And this mind, as we said earlier, we should start from where we are. Is it there on a very subtle level or on very gross behaviors? Gross behaviors, we should start from that. So with this mind, which is, you know, running here and there so rampantly, So this one needs to be tamed. So for that, to tame that is nothing, quite easy, simply taming the physical and verbal actions. Because the physical and verbal actions, they reflect our grosser levels of the mental states. When you tame them, the grosser levels of our mental states are tamed. For that, for the monastics, you have your own monastic vows, and for the laypersons, they have their own pratimoksha vows. So we need to really be very strict with these, training that way. So then at one point, because of these, then there is a natural calming down of your mind. Don't expect yourself to be Buddha right from the beginning. Right? There's the natural calming down of your mind, which you're going to experience, gradually. So then at that point, you are prepared to discipline your subtler mental states. Now you have already disciplined the grosser mental states. Now you do need to, once that happens, then you are eligible for calming down the subtler mental states. For that, we do the second high training in meditative concentration. That is to calm down or discipline our subtler mental states. And then with that, you focus. With that refined state of the mind, you focus on emptiness. This is the high training in wisdom. So this is the general exposition of Buddhism. However, you want to add Tantra to it after knowing the workings of this magnificent, subtle, clear-light mind, then you need to train even more. You need to train even more. So you can, after 5 years of training, you'll become, a general medical practitioner, general medical practitioner. But if you really want to specialize in the brain surgery and these things, then you need, further trainings. So likewise, after training in this, the first higher training in ethical discipline, higher training in meditative concentration, and higher training in wisdom, on top of that, if you are really eligible, then we need to do further training in this mind, the meditative concentration and also the wisdom. So for that, we employ very special techniques in Tantra in order to activate this subtle energy. Whereas, this teaching of the higher trainings, since this is common to Sutra and Tantra, according to Sutra, the training is done on the level of the grosser levels of the mind. Meaning, grosser levels of the mind, meaning, earlier I told you grosser and subtle, right? So now, within that subtle, we can further classify into gross and subtle. Within that class of the subtle minds, they are, relatively grosser and even subtler. So Tantra employs to, whereas Sutra simply employs to use the grosser within that, relatively grosser ones, within that domain of the subtle minds, right? Training that. And then Tantra employs techniques to train not only the relatively grosser parts of the subtle minds, even the subtlest of the subtle minds. The Tantra, techniques activate that. So this is a thing, So we see that the basic. If you simply want to, look at what's really happening over there, like this, then there is no, for you, if you simply want to see how the people are practicing, watching a movie, of the great practitioners practicing whole day and night, these things, and you can have, a cup of tea, biscuits, and these things. You can simply enjoy it, So you yourself, no need to do it. But if you really want to do one like that, then this is not enough. You really start from the basic thing. What is that? Observing sound ethical discipline. So from there you have to start. And then gradually you can expect, to become great accomplished beings. Not only for oneself, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay, yes?
My question is slightly off topic, but
Ah.
I thought I could ask you because it is related. I would always have wondered, are meditations such as the meditation on patience
Mhm.
included under the second higher training or the third higher training? Because one way I've heard it explained, that the second higher training is just shamatha, and the
Mhm.
third is all the vipassana meditations.
I see. Okay, so actually, the one that I explained earlier is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama usually explains, number one, and we really don't need to say that it's His Holiness who said it or something like that. Through a common sense as well, we can, make sense out of this pattern, First, we should train in the grosser level. Once you get expert, once you get disciplined in that, or once you are trained in that, then you can jump to the next step in a gradual way, in a stepwise way, right? So the meditation on patience, so it depends. The patience, some of which are like, really very obvious, where you cannot control yourself, you start smashing the other person, you start smashing yourself, even committing suicide, they're so gross, So these come under the first. So where, for example, if you, say, in the Pratimoksha vow, so say, even think about the Pratimoksha vow of the laypersons, let alone the monastics. Laypersons, you are not supposed to kill others, So the Buddha said that, don't kill others. Right? So under this, just as you are not supposed to kill others, you are not supposed to, stab others. It may not kill others, but still it is implied. When you are not stab others, you are not supposed to hit like this. This is also implied. Right? If this is not applied, this means you are not supposed to, throw arrows by means of your words. Very sharp arrows, hurting the other's feeling. This is also implied, not allowed. So all these come under the practice of what? Patience, right? Look, now these are the grosser levels. So I told you, observing the ethical disciplines of, the layperson's Pratimoksha vow and the monastic's Pratimoksha vows. So they all fall under the category of the first high training, right? So all those practices, or practice of patience, related, associated with the Pratimoksha vow fall in this category. And then whereas, then you become, that, or someone coming to abuse you so obviously, and then ordinary people would immediately respond by, hitting back, something like that, and then you remain calm in these things. And people will really, look, the person is really observing his ethical discipline, the Pratimoksha vow of the layperson and the monastics. Look, wonderful. But then within the person, very subtle, little bit of annoyance and irritations can happen. Still he can control it so easily. Even if he controls it, still, it is there. What needs to be controlled? So that as well needs to be eliminated. So for that, the single-pointed meditation and the high training of the meditative concentration and the wisdom together will work to eliminate that, right? Together will eliminate that. In fact, for your information, I like to simply share this with you. For your information, it is said that actually, in order to, the desire realm can be divided into three. The whole samsara can be divided into three realms. What are they? Desire realm, form realm, and formless realm. So in order to achieve that mental state whereby you are qualified to take birth in the formal realm, the first formal realm, so there all stains of anger, all sins of anger in the sense, all manifest anger must be eliminated. Whether subtle or gross, must be eliminated. It's not a matter of achieving nirvana. Even within samsara, to take birth in the first realm, the form realm, which is of further 4 divisions, the first of the form realm. So there, even to, you know, be able to enlist yourself, enroll yourself there, you need to say that I've abandoned anger. This subtle and the gross both. Look, so this is quite interesting a bit, right? Okay. So now look, now going back to the response to Christina's question. Say, because of these practices, you know, then when you're able to make this, activate this subtle energy so freely, at that point, you know, this subtle energy will start working in its own way, you know, without any obscurations. So what is that? It'll simply pervade all over, everywhere, every atom of the universe, right? So when that subtle energy pervades every atom of the universe, what accompanies that subtle energy? The subtle mind. So which means that every atom of the universe, this subtle mind knows. So what is that mind? The mind of the Buddha. So therefore we say the Buddha's mind, you know, gets access simultaneously to every bit of the universe, every atom of the universe, right? So this explanation is not found in Vibhashka and Sautrantika. Not only in Vibhashka Sautrantika, even in the all over in Sutric system, right? Okay, so this is, you know, all this is a form of digression, but it's really very helpful. Yeah. Okay, now we move ahead. Okay, we are done with that. Now we go on page 121. Is it 121? Okay, yeah. The nature of the parts, objects abandoned by the parts, and the nature of the parts, is it? Okay, yeah. They make a presentation of the 5 parts of the 3 vehicles. This is also what is already discussed there in Vibhashka tenet. They assert that all 16 moments of the 8 parts of forbearance and the 8 parts of knowledge are a part of seeing. So last time, according to Vibhashka, so to, you know, to recall what we did earlier, we have 16 moments of, you know, 16 moments of very refined, exalted wisdom, 16 moments, which, you know, understands the Four Noble Truths in whatever way. So these 16 moments of the exalted wisdoms, you know, so Vibhashka said that these 16 moments, they just, you know, they are generated in a sequential way, in 16 actual 16 moments. And then the first 15 belongs to the part of seeing, and the last one belongs to the part of what? Meditation. Good. So now now there's a slight change here, and this change is, you know, is what is accepted by all other schools other than Vibhashka. So what do they say? They make a presentation of the 5 parts of the 3 vehicles. The Sravasti vehicle, you know, and then Pratika Buddha vehicle and the Bodhisattva vehicle. Each of these 3 having 5 parts: the part of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, normal learning, right? And then on top of that, they assert that all 16 moments, now look, of these of the 8 parts of forbearance and 8 parts of knowledge that we already did, are the part of seeing. So the slight change here from what we have in Vibhashka is that all 16, it's not just the first 15, but all 16 falls in the category of part of seeing. So now this is what is accepted by all other schools as well. It is only the Vibhashka who don't agree to this. All other schools like Chittamatra, Sautrantika, and Madhyamikas. Now next passage. Because of the appearing object of direct perception must be a specifically characterized object. The proponents of Sutra do not assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is the object of the mode of apprehension of an uninterrupted part of the hearers or anyone's part of seeing. So now look, the first line of this passage, because the appearing object of direct perception must be a specifically characterized object. Again, this is quite unique of this school. Say, last time in Vipassana tenet, we studied the specifically characterized and the generally characterized phenomena, right? I don't know if you have that background so fresh in your mind right now. We said that the specifically characterized phenomena, it is mutually inclusive with impermanent phenomena. And the generally characterized phenomena is mutually inclusive with the permanent phenomena, right? So which means that, so this is one thing. And another point being made here is that according to Sautrantika school, the direct perceptions. What is the difference between direct perceptions and conceptual perception? Good. Conceptualizations or conceptual thoughts, they use the mental image. For example, say you close your eyes and think of the flower. You can think of the flower. This means that, but it's not too clear as what you see by your eyes. It is in the form of some kind of blurred image. So this image that forms in your mind, is what is referred to as the mental image or the generic image, right? So the conceptual minds, they use this generic image, whereas the direct perception, they see the object directly, right? Now look, through my eyes, can you see the mental image of this flower? No. Mental image of the flower, doesn't it exist? It does exist, but it's not perceptible to our eyes because it's not functional thing. So the direct perceptions, now look, this is another point here, according to this school. The direct perceptions, they only, they don't directly see imputed phenomena. They simply directly see only those things which are functional, functional things, right? So now look, okay, this is a kind of classwork. Let's say, on the table, do you see elephant? No. Do you see the non-existence of the elephant?
No.
Ah.
No, if you did,
But again, answer it so honestly. Don't try to think of the tenet system that you've learned. Oh, according to that system, I should say, I'm not seeing it. Don't say it. Simply speak from your heart what you feel. Even if it may differ from someone else's answer, don't worry. As long as it is, it is so pure. This is what I want. Yes.
This is why I think, because if I saw the absence of elephant, I went, do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it there? Do you see what I see? They go, no. And then I say, do you see the absence of elephant?
Yes.
Only after I specified it, because you don't see that.
You can't see it, it's an absence, there's nothing there to see.
It's not perhaps, see is not a good word, perhaps it's apprehend,
Well, no, with the eyes. He's talking about
Eyes.
He's talking about with the eyes.
Your eye doesn't apprehend, your mind apprehends.
And-
Your eye
But
see.
Christina is quite right, and you're quite right in your own ways. Because why I, agree with Christina is that even the eyes apprehend. And why I agree with you is that, there's nothing really to see. When you see, oh, there's a flower over there. So, say, how many things are there on my hand, on my palm? One. There are more. Absence of elephant is also there. Absence of the universe is also there. Right? So this indicates that when you say see, it connotes something tangible or something functional thing, right? So this is why I agree with Kathleen, right? So this means, now look, with that in mind, right, direct perceptions, they see only functional things. Right? So if that is the case, now look, say we're all meditating, we are on the path of meditation. No, path of preparation, which means we are on the bound. After a few seconds, we are going to, promote to the path of seeing, So now done. We already promoted to the path of seeing, which means we are, what is path of seeing? Say we are all meditating on the absence of self-sufficient substantial existence, right? So say we are meditating on this. And then while meditating on that object, we are upgraded from the path of preparation to the path of what? Seeing, right? Okay. So now, what should we be seeing? What should we be meditating on?
The absence.
The absence of what? Self-sufficient substantial existence, right? So this meditative state, which is also referred to as the exalted awareness, exalted path, it is meditating on something. What is it meditating on? The absence of self-sufficient substantial existence. So is there the generic image or the mental image formed?
No, it's direct.
Good. It is the path of seeing. We are on the path of seeing. And the path of seeing can have the generic, a conceptual part, but this is the fresh path of seeing. Fresh path of seeing should necessarily be direct perception. Right? So we are, the kind of experience, meditative state that we're experiencing right now is a direct perception. And what is the object of that? It is the
phenomena.
So first, the object at least should be, in principle, it should be the absence of self-sufficient substantial self, or the person, or entity, whatever, right? But according to the text, it says that the direct perceptions only see functional things, not abstract or not non-functional things. What about the absence of autonomous substantial existence? Is it functional or non-functional thing? Non-functional phenomena, right? So it's not being seen there, right? You got it. So if you feel something amazement, this means you got it. Whereas if you see it's all right, this is you haven't got it. Okay. So if you say, oh, I see. Now there's a calm here. So this means that you got it. So now let's see what is the response given. Because the appearing object of direct perception must be a specifically characterized object. Specifically characterized object is equivalent or synonymous with functional things. The proponents of sutra do not assert that the subtle selflessness of persons, what is that? Absence of self-sufficient substantial persons is the object of, let me read it again. The proponents of sutra do not assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is the object of the mode of apprehension by an uninterrupted path of hearers, path of seeing. Uninterrupted path, last time we said it, the hearers path, the path of seeing, the first moment of that is the uninterrupted path. The second moment is the path of liberation or the path of release, So in short, all these 16 moments. So after all, to put it easily, if you cannot recall what these 16 moments, each of these 16 moments are, as we did already, but at the most, for our convenience sake, all these 16 moments which belong to the path of seeing, they are all direct perceptions, right? So this moment of the subtle selflessness of persons is, they do not assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is the object of the mode of apprehension of that direct perception of the path of seeing, right? So now what is the object of this meditation? Uninterrupted path, the path of seeing. Okay, so now let's go further. Perhaps there is a response here. This is because they assert that the subtle selflessness of persons is realized implicitly, not directly, implicitly by hearers through explicit comprehension of compositional phenomena. Compositional phenomena you know, the mental and the physical aggregates. Compositional phenomena referring to compositional phenomena is a synonym with functional things, right? So, in short, what is happening is that, look, when I look at when you look at my hand, do you see anything on the hand? No, right? Right. And do you see the absence of something on my hand? Okay, so whatever you may call it, but you can decide that there's nothing over there. You can decide, you understand that, you know, the absence of something on my palm. Do you understand this? Okay, you understand this, right? So how do you do? So let's better put it this way. Okay, this side of the table, right? Now say this is the line. This is the line. So to my left side, you know, of the table, the left side of the table, from your side is right, you know, to the left side of the table, you know, on top of this piece of cloth, is there anything on top? No, right? Do you know the absence of something on the top of this table? You know this. But how do you know about this? How do you know this absence? Through your eye consciousness, or through your is it what your mind knows, or is it what your body knows? What mind knows. And out of the different minds, you know, out of the 5 sensory minds and 1 mental mind, which knows it? Mental. So say, you know, you keep your eyes closed, and then would you know that there's something on the table, or there isn't something on the table? By keeping your eyes closed and you know, remain in this distance. Would you know this? No. So this means that it is somehow the medium is this eye consciousness, you know. So then this medium, the eye consciousness, how does it know that there is? You keep on looking at it. You keep on looking at it. You know that there is no elephant on this table, right? You keep on looking at it, right? Oh, Kathleen is trying to with the one eye.
This time, maybe.
I don't know. So whatever is the case. Okay. So now, how do you decide? How do you decide that there is no elephant on this, you know, on this table? Very simple. Say, your eyes could see what? Everything green on this table, which is the color of the cloth. By seeing the green on this, you know, the green, which is the color of the cloth on this table, everywhere on this table, you know, which means that there is no space left for something else to be on, because you are seeing, you know, all spaces covered by this piece of cloth. If there is something on this table like this, you know, then a small piece of the green is lost, right? So since that nothing, no piece of green part is lost on this part of the table, we say that nothing is there. What you see directly is the cloth. The cloth by your eyes directly. You see that, and from there you infer, you know, or implicitly you understand that there is no elephant on this table, right? So likewise, what you truly, so now look, going back to the main point, this meditative, you know, exalted wisdom, which is promoted from, you know, upgraded from the path of preparation to the path of seeing. So here, during the path of preparation, it's all right. It is conceptual. Now it is upgraded to a non-conceptual state. So, say you are meditating on the selflessness of oneself, right? You are meditating on the absence of, or the emptiness of self-sufficient, substantial, Alec, you know, or say whoever you are, Kevin or whatever. So simply, you know, imagine that. So when you do that, you know, now that it becomes non-conceptual, it cannot see the non-functional things, right? So say you search, you see, the body, the physical body, the 5 aggregates, the physical, the aggregate of the body, aggregate of the feeling, the aggregate of the discrimination, aggregate of the composition factor, aggregate of consciousness. So nowhere is that self, the all-pervading self, nowhere that exists. So you simply see, that directly what you see is these aggregates. And then from there, just as directly we see the, all pervaded by the green cloth, and then from there, implicitly, you understand that there is nothing on top of that. So similarly, you only see, the different parts, the 5 aggregates. And then, aside these aggregates, you don't see the self, right? Aside these aggregates, you don't see the self. So, this absence of that self-sufficient substantial self is implied, is implicitly understood by this exalted wisdom of the path of seeing, right? So what you see, what you explicitly see is the aggregates. And from there, what you implicitly understand is the absence of that self. Because you only see, if there is a self-sufficient substantial self, by pointing to so closely towards these aggregates, you should be able to point to that there is that. There is that, self-sufficient substantial self. But this is not found. So that is implied.
What sort of meditational method does that imply? Like, it sort of seems to me like if that were the case, that all you had to do was explicitly or directly take the aggregates as an object, and you could then implicitly understand selflessness, then it would be the easiest thing in the world to do.
Very good question. Very good question. So this, what is said here is only to inform you, So to teach someone that, 2 plus 2 is 4, right? To teach someone that you don't need it is wrong to introduce, all the complicated, calculus and all these things, the complicated mathematical formulas and these things is useless. So simply give a very small information, just enough to understand this. So similarly, the information that is given here is just sufficient enough to tell us that even if, the direct perceptions, they don't see the non-functional things, still it understands that non-functional thing. So the information given here is just sufficient to get to this understanding. It's not the actual meditation on the selflessness, right? Okay. So anyway, that's very interesting question. Okay, I think we should leave here. It's already 3:40.